welcome. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Or, I might show up at your door. I'm just here to share some creepy stories, so sit back and enjoy. Disclaimer: the content presented in the video is purely for entertainment purposes only. The theories and stories discussed in this video are speculative and are not supported by any evidence or proof. Viewer discretion is advised. I was sprawled out on my couch, half watching a rerun of some mindless sitcom, when the emergency alert chimed on my phone. It wasn't the usual shrill tone for severe weather or amber alerts. This was different, deeper, longer, and immediately unsettling. My phone screen lit up with the words, "Emergency alert. Danger. Stay quiet. Do not leave your home. Lock all doors and windows." I blinked at it for a moment, my brain scrambling to process. What kind of alert was this? Tornadoes and storms didn't care if you were quiet. And danger? What kind of danger? My first instinct was to check the local news, but as I scrolled through apps, everything was eerily silent. No breaking news, no live reports, nothing. It was like the world had collectively gone mute. Must be a glitch, I muttered to myself, but even my voice felt out of place. My words hung in the air, too loud against the sudden realization that my neighborhood was quieter than it should have been. No cars passing, no kids yelling down the street, not even the hum of distant conversation. I peeked out the window, brushing aside the edge of the curtain. The streetlights glowed like normal, but the stillness was unnatural. The neighbor's porch light flickered, and for a second, I saw Mrs. Hillman's silhouette by her window. She waved tentatively, and I gave a small nod back, but the unease lingered. Even the usual barking from her yappy little dog, Max, was absent. That alone should have been a red flag. Max never shut up. I locked my door. Then I locked it again, just for good measure. I even slid the deadbolt across, something I rarely did in our quiet, sleepy town. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that locking doors wasn't enough. I checked the other windows, making sure they were shut tight. As I moved through the house, the sound of my own footsteps seemed to echo too much, bouncing off the walls in a way that made me want to tiptoe instead. My phone buzzed again, and for a split second, I thought it was another alert, maybe more information. But it was just a text from a group chat. WTF is this alert about? It was Mark, the guy who lived down the block. He was always the first to crack a joke, but even his tone seemed off. Other messages started rolling in from friends and neighbors. Is this a prank? Why is everything so quiet? Even the crickets stopped. Anyone hear the scream earlier? I froze at that last one. Scream? I hadn't heard anything. But then again, my TV had been on, and I'd only just started paying attention. I was about to reply when another sound reached my ears. Soft, faint, but unmistakable. Scratching. It came from the back door, where my yard opened into a stretch of woods. My stomach twisted as I strained to listen. It wasn't frantic or aggressive, more like testing. The sound of nails or claws lightly dragging along the wood, pausing, and then continuing. Probably a raccoon, I whispered, but the words felt like a lie the moment they left my mouth. I grabbed the nearest thing I could use as a weapon, a heavy flashlight from the hall closet, and approached the door. My hands were clammy, and I cursed under my breath as the beam of the flashlight wavered slightly from my trembling grip. The scratching stopped. I froze, flashlight raised, heart hammering in my chest. For a moment, there was nothing but silence so thick it felt like the world itself was holding its breath. Then, from the corner of my eye, I saw it. A shadow moving just beyond the door's frosted glass window. It wasn't a person. I knew that instantly. The way it moved was all wrong, too fluid and deliberate. A strange, heavy shuffling, almost like someone dragging wet fabric across the ground. I stood there, paralyzed, as the shadow loomed closer to the glass. And then came the growl, low, guttural, and deep enough to vibrate in my chest. It wasn't loud, but it didn't have to be. The sheer menace in that sound made every instinct in my body scream to run, hide, do anything but stand there like an idiot. I backed away slowly, careful not to make a sound. My phone buzzed again in my pocket, but I ignored it, too afraid the noise would draw whatever that thing was closer. Another growl followed, softer this time, almost curious. Then came a loud thud against the door, as if it were testing its strength. I clenched the flashlight tighter, stepping back until my heels bumped against the living room coffee table. Just as I thought the door might give, the sound stopped. No growling, no scratching, just silence again. The shadow lingered for a moment longer before slinking away, swallowed by the darkness. I exhaled shakily, realizing I'd been holding my breath. My legs felt like jelly, but I forced myself to sit down and grab my phone. The group chat had exploded while I'd been frozen in fear. Something's outside my house. Don't go near the windows. What is that thing? Max is gone. I heard him barking, and now Mrs. Hillman's dog. My stomach sank as I realized the scratching had been replaced by another sound. A faint whimper, cut off sharply by the same deep growl I'd heard earlier. The emergency alert wasn't a mistake. Whatever this was, it was real, and it was hunting. The silence in the house was unbearable. My mind raced, replaying the scratching at the door, the growl, the shadow moving behind the frosted glass. Whatever had been outside was no raccoon, no bear. It was something else entirely. I didn't know what, but one thing was clear. The alert was deadly serious. I couldn't stay near the back door. Gripping the flashlight tightly, I moved to the living room and crouched by the couch, phone in hand. My heartbeat roared in my ears as I skimmed through the group chat, looking for answers. Max is gone, Mrs. Hillman had typed earlier. I couldn't stop imagining the little dog's bark being silenced by that thing. Another message caught my attention. Stay away from the windows. It saw me. I couldn't help but glance toward the front window, where the curtain was still drawn halfway open. My breathing hitched. If it had seen someone else, what were the chances it was still out there, watching, waiting? Before I could think further, the scratching returned. This time, it came from the side of the house, near the kitchen window. My stomach churned as the sound grew louder. It wasn't frantic. It was steady, deliberate. Whatever this thing was, it didn't seem in any rush. I crawled toward the kitchen, careful not to make a sound. My flashlight was off, and the dim light of the street lamp outside provided just enough illumination for me to navigate. As I reached the kitchen, I crouched below the counter, heart thudding wildly. The scratching stopped. For a moment, there was silence again, that thick, oppressive quiet that made my skin crawl. Then, I heard it, a low, heavy thump, like something large landing on the ground outside. I peeked over the counter, just enough to glimpse the window. At first, I saw nothing but shadows. Then, a shape moved, a hulking, distorted figure that didn't seem to walk so much as glide, its movements unnaturally smooth. It paused in front of the window, its massive form obscured by the glass and curtains. I held my breath, frozen in place. The thing tilted its head, as if listening. Suddenly, the neighbor's dog, 2 houses down, let out a sharp, desperate bark. The creature's head snapped toward the sound with lightning speed. My gut twisted as it let out a low, guttural growl, an almost triumphant sound. The dog barked again, and the thing moved. Fast. Too fast. It disappeared from my view in an instant, heading straight for the source of the noise. The barks turned into high-pitched yelps, followed by a blood-curdling scream from the neighbor. I clamped my hands over my mouth, forcing myself not to make a sound. The screams were cut short, replaced by a sickening, wet-tearing noise. Tears stung my eyes as I crouched there, paralyzed with fear. My mind raced with questions. What was this thing? Where had it come from? And why did it hunt sound? The emergency alert. It hadn't just been a warning, it had been a set of rules, survival instructions. Stay quiet. lock all doors and windows. I'd done all that, but the flimsy locks on my house suddenly felt like they wouldn't stand a chance if that thing decided to come back. I stayed huddled there for what felt like hours, though it was probably only minutes. Slowly, I reached for my phone and opened the group chat again. The messages had slowed down, replaced by sporadic updates that painted a grim picture. It's still out there. I saw it kill someone. We need to get help. The power's out everywhere. No one's coming. The power outage. I hadn't even noticed when it happened, but now it made sense. Whatever was going on, it wasn't just localized to my block. The entire town, maybe more, was plunged into darkness. Suddenly, a loud thud jolted me out of my thoughts. Came from the roof. I froze, every muscle in my body tensing. The thud was followed by a series of soft, deliberate taps, as if something was walking across the shingles. My breath caught in my throat. I slowly turned off my phone's screen, plunging myself into total darkness. The tapping grew louder, closer, until it sounded directly above me. My heart pounded so loudly I was certain the thing could hear it. Then it stopped. For a few agonizing moments, there was only silence. I strained my ears, trying to catch any hint of movement. Just when I thought it might have left, the sound of heavy breathing filled the room. It was coming from the vent above me. I bit down on my knuckle to keep from screaming. The creature had somehow gotten inside. It was in the ventilation system, crawling through the narrow ducts like a predator stalking its prey. The breathing moved past me, growing fainter as it traveled toward the back of the house. I dared to exhale, the sound barely audible. My mind raced, trying to come up with a plan. If I stayed here, it would eventually find me. But if I moved, I risked making noise and drawing it straight to me. I decided to risk it. Slowly, inch by inch, I crawled toward the hallway. My muscles ached from staying tense for so long, but I didn't dare make a sound. Every movement was painstakingly slow, my flashlight tucked under my arm. I reached the hallway and pressed myself against the wall, listening for any sign of the creature. The house was silent again, save for the occasional creak of the floorboards. I had no idea if it was still inside or if it had moved on. Just as I began to relax, thinking I might have a chance to hide, a loud crash shattered the silence. The thing had found the back door. The crash of the back door being torn apart reverberated through the house, sending a jolt of panic through my body. My breathing hitched, and I clamped a hand over my mouth to stifle any sound. The creature was inside now. I pressed myself flat against the wall, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. Every fiber of my being screamed at me to run, but I knew better. If it hunted by sound, any noise would bring it straight to me. My flashlight felt heavy in my trembling hand, but I didn't dare turn it on. The house fell silent again, except for the faint creaks of the creature moving across the wooden floor. Its footsteps were unnervingly slow and deliberate, as if it was savoring the hunt. I needed to think. Fast, I grabbed my phone and carefully turned the brightness down to its lowest setting. My hands shook as I pulled up the group chat again, desperate for any updates. It broke into my house. One message read, "Stay silent. It reacts to everything. Does anyone know what it is? Where it came from?" Another person asked. A reply popped up beneath it. "Heard it's some kind of experiment. Military? Government? I don't know. But it hunts anything that makes noise. Don't trust the whispers." The whispers? My blood ran cold. As if on cue, I heard something faint. At first, I thought it was just the wind, but then I realized it was a voice. "Help me." It was coming from the living room, soft and pleading. My breath caught in my throat. The voice sounded human, terrified and weak. "Is someone there?" It called again, slightly louder this time. For a split second, I considered answering. But then, the words from the chat echoed in my mind. "Don't trust the whispers." I stayed frozen, listening as the voice repeated itself. "Help me, please. I'm hurt." The tone was off, too monotone, too measured. It didn't waver like a real person's voice would. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end as I realized what it was doing. It was bait. The creature was mimicking a human voice to draw me out. I clutched the flashlight tighter, my knuckles white. My instincts told me to stay hidden, but my rational mind needed to confirm. Slowly, I peeked around the corner into the living room. My heart dropped. The creature stood there, its massive frame hunched and unnatural. It was vaguely humanoid, but its proportions were all wrong. Arms too long, legs too thin, and a torso that seemed to twist unnaturally as it moved. Its skin was a mottled gray, blending seamlessly into the shadows. It stood completely still, but its head tilted slightly, as if listening for movement. Then, it spoke again, its voice a perfect mimic of a human plea. "Help me!" I ducked back behind the wall, every muscle in my body trembling. This thing wasn't just a predator, it was intelligent. It knew how to manipulate its prey. The group chat buzzed in my hand, and I glanced down to see a new message. "If it talks, don't answer. It's learning." The thought made my stomach churn. This thing wasn't just hunting by instinct. It was adapting. I scrolled back through the chat, hoping to find more useful information. Amid the frantic messages, one stood out. "It reacts to sound, but it doesn't see well. Stay in the shadows and keep silent." My mind raced. If it couldn't see well, that gave me a small advantage. I could use the darkness to stay hidden, but I needed to move carefully. My hiding spot in the hallway wouldn't last long if it decided to search the house thoroughly. Another message popped up. "Use distractions. Noise can lead it away, but don't let it trace it back to you." Distractions. I glanced at the flashlight in my hand. It was heavy enough to make a decent noise if I threw it. The idea of parting with my only weapon made my stomach twist, but I didn't see another option. Carefully, I crawled toward the edge of the hallway, keeping low to the ground. The creature was still in the living room, its footsteps soft as it moved around. It wasn't making the mimicry sounds anymore, which somehow made it even more unnerving. I gripped the flashlight tightly, weighing my options. If I threw it too close, I'd give myself away. Too far, and it might not hear it. I needed to aim just right. Taking a deep breath, I flung the flashlight toward the kitchen. It clattered against the tile floor with a sharp metallic sound. The creature reacted instantly. It let out a low, guttural growl and darted toward the noise, its movements disturbingly fast. I didn't wait to see what it would do next. Using the opportunity, I crept toward the stairs, keeping my steps as silent as possible. My heart thundered in my chest as I reached the landing, glancing back to ensure the creature was still distracted. From my vantage point, I could see it crouched in the kitchen, its head tilted as it examined the flashlight. Its long, spindly fingers tapped against the floor, as if trying to decipher what it was. I turned and climbed the stairs, moving as quickly as I dared. My bedroom seemed like the safest bet for now, at least until I could figure out a better plan. Once inside, I shut the door softly and locked it. The lock wouldn't hold if the creature decided to come up here, but it gave me a small sense of security. I sank to the floor, my back against the door. My phone buzzed again, and I checked the chat. "It's learning faster than we thought. Don't make the same noise twice." Great. So even my distraction trick had a time limit. My phone buzzed again, but this time it wasn't the chat. It was another emergency alert. "Updated alert. Remain silent. Avoid whispers. Stay indoors until further notice." Avoid whispers. My skin crawled at the memory of the creature's mimicry. It had been too convincing, too human. As I sat there, trying to calm my racing thoughts, I realized the night wasn't even close to over. I sat against the bedroom door, every nerve on edge. The emergency alert repeated in my mind like a grim mantra. Avoid whispers. Stay silent. Stay indoors. I didn't feel safe even locked in my room. The house was too small, too fragile. If the creature decided to come upstairs, there would be nowhere to run. I needed a plan, something beyond huddling in a corner, praying it wouldn't find me. The faint creaks of floorboards downstairs reminded me I didn't have much time. My heart thumped wildly as I pressed my ear to the door, listening for any sign that it had followed me. The house was eerily quiet again, but that didn't comfort me. It just meant it was still hunting. My phone buzzed in my hand, and I glanced down to see another group chat message. "It's in my house." It mimicked my mom's voice. "Don't listen to it." A lump formed in my throat as I read the message. The thing could mimic people it had heard before, maybe even people it had killed. My mind conjured an image of it mimicking my voice, calling out for help to lure someone else to their doom. I shook the thought away, forcing myself to focus. I needed to be smart. If it hunted by sound, then silence was my greatest weapon. But how could I stay ahead of it without making any noise? I looked around the room, taking inventory of what I had. The closet was too obvious. If it searched the room, that would be the first place it checked. The bed's frame was low to the ground, and I doubted I could squeeze under it without making noise. That left the window. I crept toward it, careful not to let the floorboards creak beneath my weight. Sliding the curtain aside, I peered into the night. The backyard was dark, the woods beyond an endless void of shadows. Escaping that way felt like trading one nightmare for another, but staying here wasn't an option. I reached for the window latch, pausing when a sound from downstairs froze me in place. Footsteps. They were heavy, deliberate, and slow. The creature was moving through the house again, searching. My pulse quickened as the footsteps reached the bottom of the stairs. Each creak of the steps as it ascended made my breath catch. I backed away from the window, my mind racing. If it came up here, I wouldn't have time to open the window quietly. My only hope was to remain silent and hope it wouldn't check the room. The footsteps reached the top of the stairs. My heart felt like it might burst as I pressed myself into the darkest corner of the room, clutching my phone tightly. I turned the screen off, plunging myself into complete darkness. The doorknob rattled. I bit down on my lip, hard enough to taste blood, to stop myself from gasping. The creature was testing the door. A soft growl, low and guttural, rumbled from the other side. I knew I was in here. The door creaked as the creature pressed against it. The wood strained, and I realized the flimsy lock wouldn't hold if it decided to push harder. My body trembled, but I stayed frozen, forcing myself to remain silent. Suddenly, the creature stopped. The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity. Then, faintly, I heard it again. "Help me." It was my voice. My stomach churned as the mimicry filled the room. It sounded so real, so perfectly identical, that if I hadn't known better, I might have answered. "Please," it whispered, softer this time. "I'm trapped. Help." The doorknob rattled again, harder this time. My pulse thundered in my ears as I realized it was trying to manipulate me, hoping I'd respond or panic. I squeezed my eyes shut, praying it would move on. After a few agonizing moments, the footsteps retreated. The creature moved away from the door, its heavy, deliberate steps fading down the hallway. I exhaled shakily, my entire body trembling. It wasn't gone, but at least it wasn't trying to break down the door anymore. I stayed huddled in the corner for what felt like hours, though it was probably only minutes. The silence in the house was oppressive, broken only by the faint creaks of the creature moving somewhere below me. My phone buzzed again, and I hesitated before turning the screen on, worried even that small glow might draw its attention. But the message in the group chat made my blood run cold. "It learns fast. It remembers where you are. If it leaves, don't assume you're safe." It was stalking me, waiting for the right moment to strike. I realized I couldn't stay here. The house, the walls, the locked door, none of it would keep me safe. If I wanted to survive, I had to get out, find somewhere more secure. But the thought of making noise, of risking its attention, made my stomach twist with fear. Taking a deep breath, I formulated a plan. I'd use the window. The creature was downstairs now, which meant I had a chance to escape without it hearing me. I grabbed my phone, tucking it into my pocket, and crept toward the window again. Sliding the latch, I eased the window open just enough to slip through. The night air was cold against my skin, and the darkness beyond was suffocating. I hesitated for a moment, listening for any sign of the creature. The house was silent. Slowly, I climbed out, lowering myself onto the roof. The shingles felt rough beneath my hands as I moved cautiously, keeping my weight distributed to avoid making noise. The ground below seemed impossibly far away, but I knew I had to jump. My only other option was to go back inside, and that wasn't an option at all. Taking one last deep breath, I leapt. The impact of the jump rattled my body. My knees buckled as I landed in the damp grass, and I bit down hard on my lip to stifle a grunt of pain. The night swallowed me in its silence, the cold air biting through my thin clothes. I stayed low, scanning the house for any sign of movement. The broken back door hung loosely on its hinges, swaying slightly in the breeze. No sound came from within, but that didn't mean the creature was gone. I crept toward the edge of the yard, keeping to the shadows. The street beyond was eerily quiet, illuminated only by the faint, flickering glow of a single street lamp. The rest of the block was pitch black, a void of darkness that seemed to stretch endlessly. As I reached the fence, I hesitated. My house wasn't safe, but neither was the open street. The creature could be anywhere, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the faintest sound to strike. My phone buzzed in my pocket, the vibration startling me. I cursed silently, fumbling to silence it before the noise carried. Pulling it out, I glanced at the screen. "It's outside now," a message in the group chat read. "Be careful. It doesn't need to see you if it hears you." Another message followed. "Avoid the main streets. It moves fast." My pulse quickened as I glanced toward the road. Staying in the open wasn't an option, but the thick woods at the edge of the yard weren't much better. I felt trapped, caught between two equally dangerous paths. The faint sound of creaking would made my decision for me. I spun toward the house, my breath hitching. A shadow moved past one of the upstairs windows, long and distorted. It was still searching for me. I turned and climbed over the fence, careful to keep my movements slow and deliberate. The wooden slats groaned softly under my weight, but I managed to lower myself to the other side without incident. The woods were dense and suffocating, the trees forming a labyrinth of shadows. My flashlight was gone, and the weak light from my phone was barely enough to guide me. I moved cautiously, each step carefully placed to avoid snapping twigs or crunching leaves. The further I ventured into the woods, the more oppressive the silence became. Even the usual sounds of nocturnal animals were absent, as if the entire forest was holding its breath. A faint rustling behind me sent a jolt of fear through my body. I froze, my ears straining to catch any hint of movement. For a moment, there was nothing. Then, a low, guttural growl broke the silence. It was close. Panic surged through me as I ducked behind a tree, pressing myself against the rough bark. My breath came in shallow, controlled gasps as I tried to steady myself. The growl came again, louder this time, followed by the soft crunch of leaves. It was tracking me. My mind raced. I couldn't outrun it. Its speed was terrifying. But if I stayed here, it would find me. I needed to create another distraction, something to draw it away long enough for me to escape. I glanced down at my phone, an idea forming. The flashlight was gone, but I could still use the sound. I opened the music app, my fingers trembling as I scrolled through the playlists. It felt absurd to think about music in this moment, but I needed something loud, something that could echo through the trees. Finally, I found a track and hit play. The phone's speakers blared a distorted pop song, shattering the silence of the forest. The creature reacted instantly. A guttural roar echoed through the woods, and the sound of its footsteps grew frantic, racing toward the source of the noise. I didn't wait to see what happened next. Tossing the phone into the underbrush, I took off in the opposite direction, my footsteps as quiet as I could manage. My lungs burned with the effort of staying silent while moving quickly, but fear kept me going. The music faded into the distance, replaced by the horrifying sounds of the creature tearing through the forest. I didn't dare look back. Eventually, I came to a clearing, my legs trembling from exhaustion. The woods seemed quieter here, as if I'd managed to put some distance between myself and the creature. I sank to the ground, my chest heaving as I tried to catch my breath. The relief was short-lived. A faint rustling came from the edge of the clearing, followed by a low growl. My stomach dropped as I realized the truth. The distraction hadn't worked. The creature had found me again. I scrambled to my feet, searching the darkness for any sign of movement. The shadows seemed alive, shifting and twisting in ways that made my head spin. Then I saw it. The creature stepped into the clearing, its massive form silhouetted against the faint moonlight. Its elongated limbs moved with unnatural grace, and its head tilted as if studying me. For a moment, we stood there, frozen. My mind screamed at me to run, but my body refused to obey. The creature took a step forward, and I stumbled back, my foot catching on a root. I hit the ground hard, the impact knocking the wind out of me. It moved closer, its growl deepening into a guttural snarl. My chest tightened as I realized there was no escape this time. Just as it lunged, a deafening crack echoed through the clearing. The creature froze mid-step, its head snapping toward the sound. I turned to see a figure standing at the edge of the clearing, holding a rifle. The stranger fired again, and the creature let out a piercing shriek, retreating into the woods. The figure lowered the rifle and approached me cautiously. "You're lucky I found you," they said, their voice low and steady. "But we need to move. There's more than one of those things out here." The figure helped me to my feet, their grip firm but cautious. They wore a dark jacket, scuffed boots, and a battered backpack that looked like it had seen its share of battles. Their face was shadowed beneath the brim of a hat, but their eyes burned with a sharp intensity that made it clear they weren't just some lost hiker. "Can you walk?" they asked, their tone brisk. I nodded, though my legs felt like jelly. "Who are you?" I whispered, my voice hoarse from fear. The stranger gave a quick glance over their shoulder, scanning the woods. "Later," they muttered. "We need to move. Now." They didn't wait for a response, turning and striding toward the tree line with a quiet urgency. I hesitated for a moment, my mind racing. I didn't know this person, but staying behind wasn't an option. I followed, keeping close behind them as they led the way deeper into the forest. The woods felt darker than ever, the oppressive silence broken only by the faint rustling of leaves underfoot. Every shadow seemed alive, every distant sound a potential threat. "What was that thing?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The stranger glanced back at me, their expression grim. "Not here," they said, shaking their head. "Too dangerous to stop." I bit back my questions, focusing instead on staying quiet and keeping up. The stranger moved with practiced ease, their steps deliberate and silent. I couldn't help but marvel at how they seemed to know exactly where to go, even in the pitch darkness. After what felt like an eternity, we came to a small clearing. A dilapidated cabin stood at its center, its windows boarded up and its walls reinforced with sheets of metal and barbed wire. It looked more like a fortress than a home. The stranger unlocked the door with a set of heavy keys and ushered me inside. The air was musty and cold, but the cabin felt solid, a welcome change from the fragile walls of my house. "Sit," they said, gesturing to a worn-out chair near the corner. I sank into the chair, my body sagging with exhaustion. The stranger locked the door behind us and pulled a heavy wooden bar across it for good measure. They turned to me, their expression a mix of weariness and determination. "You're lucky you made it this far," they said. "Most people don't." "Made it this far?" I echoed, my voice trembling. "What are you talking about? What was that thing?" The stranger pulled a chair across from me and sat down, their rifle resting against the table. "It's not just one," they said, their voice low. "There's a whole pack of them out there. They're hunters, designed to track and kill anything that makes noise." "Designed?" I asked, my stomach twisting at the implication. The stranger nodded. "Yeah, they're not natural. Government experiment gone wrong. Or maybe it went exactly as planned. Either way, they're loose now, and the emergency alerts are all they'll tell the public. I thought about the messages I'd seen in the group chat. Whispers of government involvement of experiments. It had sounded like a conspiracy theory at the time, but now it felt all too real. Why sound? I asked. Why do they hunt noise? The stranger's gaze darkened. Don't know for sure, but I've got theories. Maybe it's their programming. Maybe it's how they were trained. Whatever the reason, they're drawn to it like sharks to blood. Once they hear you, they don't stop until they've caught you, or something louder distracts them. A chill ran down my spine as I remembered the creature mimicking my voice. And the whispers? The mimicry? The stranger's jaw tightened. That's the worst part. They learn. Every sound they hear, every voice, they can replicate it perfectly. It's how they lure people out. You can't trust anything you hear out there. I shuddered, my mind flashing back to the creature's haunting mimicry. It had sounded so real, so human. The stranger leaned forward, their voice dropping to a near whisper. You survived because you stayed quiet. But now they know you're out here. They'll keep searching. And if they can't find you, they'll find someone else. That's how they work. Always hunting, always adapting. My hands trembled as I ran them through my hair. So what do we do? Just stay locked up forever? The stranger's expression softened, just slightly. No, we fight smart. We use their strength against them. I blinked, confused. What do you mean? The stranger stood and walked to a shelf lined with gear, flares, noisemakers, even a small cassette player. They grabbed one of the noisemakers and tossed it to me. These things hunt sound, right? They said. But they're not perfect. If we can control the noise, we can control them. Draw them where we want, set traps. It's dangerous, but it's the only way to survive long term. I stared at the noisemaker in my hand, the weight of it sinking in. The idea of actively drawing the creatures toward us made my stomach churn. But the stranger's words made sense. What's your name? I asked, finally finding my voice. The stranger hesitated, then shrugged. Call me Hunter, they said. It's what I do. I managed a weak smile despite the fear still coursing through me. Fitting. Hunter glanced toward the window, their expression hardening. Get some rest while you can. Tomorrow we start planning. If we're going to survive this, we'll need more than luck. Morning came as a faint, gray light creeping through the boarded-up windows of the cabin. Sleep had been impossible. I'd spent the night replaying everything Hunter had said, every haunting detail about the creatures that hunted sound, their mimicry, their relentless pursuit. Hunter moved with quiet efficiency, gathering supplies from the cabin's cramped interior. The faint metallic clink of tools and the shuffle of gear was oddly soothing, a reminder that I wasn't alone. You're up, Hunter said without looking at me. They were bent over a table, spreading out what looked like a hand-drawn map of the forest. I sat up, rubbing the stiffness from my neck. Barely, I muttered. Did you even sleep? Hunter gave a dry chuckle. You don't sleep much when you're out here. Not if you want to stay alive. Their words sent a chill through me, but I pushed it aside. What's the plan? Hunter tapped the map. We need supplies. Food, water, ammo, anything we can find. There's an old ranger station about 3 miles east of here. It's been abandoned for years, but it might still have some useful gear. 3 miles? I asked, trying to keep the panic out of my voice. Through the woods? With them out there? Hunter's eyes met mine, their gaze steady. It's risky, but staying here without resources is a death sentence. The creatures might not know where we are now, but they'll keep searching. Sooner or later, they'll find this place. I swallowed hard, nodding. Okay, but what if they hear us? Hunter gestured to the noisemakers on the table. We use these, create distractions, draw them away. The key is to stay one step ahead. And if we're lucky, we'll be back before they even realize we've left. I wasn't sure lucky was the word I'd use, but I didn't have a better plan. I stood, steeling myself for what lay ahead. We set out just after sunrise, the forest bathed in a pale, sickly light that did little to dispel its oppressive atmosphere. Hunter led the way, moving with the same deliberate silence I'd noticed the night before. I followed as closely as I could, mimicking their movements and praying I wouldn't trip over a root or snap a twig. The woods felt alive with tension, every rustling leaf and distant creak setting my nerves on edge. "Stay close," Hunter whispered over their shoulder. "And remember, no sudden noises. If you hear anything, don't react. It's probably not what you think it is." I nodded, gripping the noisemaker they'd given me like a lifeline. We moved steadily, pausing every so often for Hunter to check the map and listen for any sign of the creatures. The journey felt endless, each step a calculated risk. About an hour in, we reached a narrow stream cutting through the forest. The sound of the water was faint but constant, masking some of the quieter noises around us. Hunter stopped, motioning for me to do the same. "Take a break," they said, kneeling to refill a canteen. "We'll keep moving in a minute." I crouched beside them, the tension in my legs easing slightly. "Do you think the ranger station will have what we need?" I asked. Hunter shrugged. "Maybe. These places were usually stocked with emergency supplies, radios, medical kits, that kind of thing. It's our best shot." I nodded, watching the water trickle over the rocks. For a moment, the forest felt almost peaceful. Then I heard it, a faint, distant whisper. My heart froze as the sound cut through the quiet, too soft to make out but unmistakable. I turned to Hunter, who was already on their feet, their rifle in hand. "Move," they said sharply. I didn't argue, scrambling to follow as they led us away from the stream. The whispers grew louder, more distinct, as if they were following us. "Please," a voice called, and my blood ran cold. It was my voice. The mimicry was perfect, every inflection and tone identical to the way I'd spoken just minutes ago. My stomach twisted as I realized the creature had been close enough to hear me earlier, close enough to learn. "Don't stop," Hunter hissed, their voice low but urgent. "It's trying to get in your head. Ignore it." I forced myself to keep moving, though every instinct screamed at me to turn back, to see if someone was actually calling for help. The whispers didn't fade. Instead, they multiplied, overlapping in a horrifying cacophony of voices. My own, Hunter's, others I didn't recognize. Hunter grabbed my arm, pulling me forward. "We're close. Just a little farther." We reached the ranger station just as the whispers began to crescendo. The building was small and weathered, its paint peeling and its windows cracked. But it was intact, and the sight of its sturdy door filled me with a flicker of hope. Hunter motioned for me to stay low as they approached the door, their rifle at the ready. After a quick scan of the surroundings, they gave a nod and pushed the door open. Inside, the station was dark and dusty, the air heavy with the scent of mildew. Hunter closed the door behind us, sliding a metal bar across it for good measure. "Start looking," they said, their voice clipped. "We don't have much time." I nodded, moving to search the shelves while Hunter kept watch. Most of the supplies were useless, old maps, faded pamphlets, empty cans. But in one of the cabinets, I found a first aid kit and a box of emergency flares. "Got something?" I said, holding them up. Hunter glanced over, their expression approving. "Good. Keep going." The whispers outside grew louder, more insistent. I tried to block them out, focusing on the task at hand. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from outside, followed by a guttural roar that made my blood run cold. Hunter's head snapped toward the door. "They're here," they said, their voice tight. The guttural roar outside sent a jolt of terror through me. It wasn't just the sound. It was the weight of it, the way it vibrated through the thin walls of the ranger station, as if the creature was announcing its presence with a predatory confidence. Hunter was already in motion, their movements precise and practiced. They tossed me a flare gun from their bag. "You know how to use this?" I nodded shakily, gripping the cold metal with both hands. "Good. If I say the word, you fire it. Straight at them or into the air to distract them." Whatever keeps us alive. My throat felt dry as I whispered, "How many are there?" Hunter peeked through a crack in the boarded window, their face grim. "Too many. At least 3, maybe more. They travel in packs when they're hunting something loud." The whispers outside swirled together, a chilling symphony of mimicry. My voice, Hunter's voice, and others, shrieks, sobs, pleas for help, all layered over one another. It was like listening to a nightmare brought to life. "We have to move," Hunter said. "If they surround us, we're dead." "But they're right outside," I hissed. Hunter's eyes met mine, steady and unflinching. "Exactly, which is why we're not staying in here to die. We use the noisemakers to lead them away, set traps, and take out as many as we can. If we're lucky, we'll split them up." I swallowed hard, trying to summon courage I didn't feel. "And if we're not lucky?" Hunter didn't answer. Hunter moved to the door, their rifle at the ready. They handed me a noisemaker, a small device that emitted a piercing, high-pitched wail when activated. "When I say go, toss it out that window," Hunter instructed, pointing to a broken pane on the far side of the room. "That'll draw them to the opposite side. Then we make a run for it. Stick close to me, and don't stop for anything." My heart pounded as I positioned myself by the window, the noisemaker clutched tightly in my hand. Hunter gave me a nod, their expression unreadable but calm. "Now!" I yanked the pin on the noisemaker and hurled it through the window. It hit the ground outside with a metallic clatter before erupting into a shrill, unrelenting screech. The effect was immediate. The whispers outside faltered, replaced by snarls and the sound of heavy, rapid footsteps. Through the cracks in the boards, I glimpsed the creatures, tall, spindly figures with unnaturally long limbs and featureless faces. They moved with a horrifying fluidity, their heads snapping toward the source of the sound. Hunter shoved the door open and we bolted. The forest closed in around us as we ran, the terrain uneven and treacherous. My lungs burned, every breath a struggle to stay silent. Behind us, the creatures howled in frustration, their footsteps pounding after us. Hunter led the way, their movements sure and deliberate despite the chaos. They tossed another noisemaker into the trees, drawing some of the creatures away. But I could still hear others pursuing us, their growls growing louder. "We're not going to outrun them," Hunter said, glancing over their shoulder. "We make our stand here." I stopped, my legs trembling, as Hunter motioned for me to take cover behind a fallen tree. They crouched beside me, their rifle aimed at the darkness. "Stay low and stay quiet," they said. "If anything gets too close, use the flare gun." I nodded, clutching the flare gun tightly. The air was thick with tension, every second stretching into an eternity. Then the first creature appeared. It moved into the clearing with eerie grace, its elongated limbs folding and unfolding like a spider's. Its head tilted, and I could feel its gaze, even without eyes. Hunter fired. The shot rang out, shattering the silence. The bullet struck the creature square in the chest, and it let out a piercing shriek, staggering backward before collapsing. The sound drew more of them. 2 more emerged from the trees, their movements frantic and unnerving. Hunter fired again, hitting one in the leg. It stumbled but didn't fall, its body twisting unnaturally as it kept coming. "Now!" Hunter shouted. I raised the flare gun and pulled the trigger. The flare shot out in a blinding streak of light, striking the creature in the head. It screamed, its body writhing before collapsing in a heap. The other creature hesitated, its head swiveling toward the flare still burning on the ground. Hunter took the opportunity to fire again, the bullet tearing through its throat. Silence fell, broken only by the crackling of the flare. Hunter didn't lower their rifle, their eyes scanning the darkness. "They're not all gone," they said. "Stay sharp." I nodded, my hands shaking as I reloaded the flare gun. A sudden roar from behind made us spin around. Another creature was charging toward us, faster and more furious than the others. Hunter fired, but the shot went wide. I raised the flare gun, my finger trembling on the trigger. Before I could fire, the creature lunged. Hunter shoved me out of the way, the impact sending me sprawling to the ground. I scrambled to my feet, turning just in time to see Hunter wrestling with the creature, their knife flashing as they slashed at its limbs. "Go!" Hunter shouted. "Run! No!" I screamed, aiming the flare gun. The creature was too close to Hunter. I couldn't risk hitting them. Summoning every ounce of courage I had, I grabbed a noisemaker and activated it, tossing it as far as I could. The piercing wail drew the creature's attention, and it turned, releasing Hunter and charging toward the sound. Hunter staggered to their feet, blood staining their jacket. "Let's move," they said, their voice strained. I helped them up, and together we stumbled through the forest, the faint glow of dawn on the horizon. We didn't stop until we reached the edge of the woods, the sun rising behind us. The creatures didn't follow. Hunter collapsed against a tree, their breath ragged. "You did good back there," they said, managing a weak smile. "So did you," I replied, my voice trembling. Hunter nodded, their eyes scanning the horizon. "This isn't over," they said. "Not by a long shot, but we're alive, and that's a start." As the morning light bathed the forest, I felt a flicker of hope. The fight wasn't over, but we had survived the night.